Hello, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. This is such an exciting event tonight. I cannot wait to get into this discussion. Hello to everyone. My name is Bianca Prasad. I'm the Executive Director of The Word. We are a nonprofit that promotes equity through the literary arts. One of our favorite partners is Duende District Bookstore, who we are here co-hosting this event with tonight. The discussions that we have here always cover the most poignant topics, the ones that we want to talk about the most in this community. So I'm glad to be here again tonight with Angela Maria Spring, the owner of Duende District Books, who is going to introduce our event. Hello, Angela.
Thank you so much, Bianca. You guys are a huge favorite. We do so much with The Word. There's such a wonderful organization. As you guys know, we're doing our second year of the new annual BIPOC Bookseller Awards, and the nominations for that just closed. And I want to thank everybody for supporting. It's the only industry award of its kind. And, we are here to make our spaces and to honor those who work and do so many things in this industry. And I'm just so excited to be here tonight for so many reasons. I know there's so many out there in the community tonight that are excited to be here as well. Just a little bit about us, if you are new. We are a collaborative pop-up bookstore by and for people of color where all are welcome. And the cornerstone of the Duende Project is about the collective, the community, and the creation and decolonization of literary spaces by and for people of color. And tonight, this has been an event year-long in the making. So excited to have this happen. It's also just truly, a topic that I think weighs on a lot of our minds. And it's been talked about across channels and amongst activist communities, and these two authors are just truly two brilliant minds. I am so delighted to welcome them to our space. So tonight we're going to be hearing from Rafia Zakaria, who is the author of Against White Feminism, and Ruby Hamad, author of White Tears, Brown Scars, both amazing books. I really hope that you will buy them from us. But even if you don't buy them from us, read them. They're brilliant. They're going to talk. And then we're going to open it up to you all in the audience, because I'm sure you have a lot of questions. So please put any questions that you have in the Q&A. I think it's the comment section. And then I also just wanted to let you know that we're also partnering in a couple weeks on September 8th for another amazing event with literary legend Ana Castillo. You guys, it's going to be amazing. She's going to be in conversation with our really good friend Lupita Aquino. So all that information's on our website, and you can check that out. And I really appreciate you all listening to that. So let's get on to the main event. So Rafia Zakaria is the author of The Upstairs Wife, An Intimate History of Pakistan, Veil, and many essays for The Guardian, CNN, and the New York Times Book Review. She's a regular columnist for Dawn in Pakistan and The Baffler in the United States. And then Ruby Hamad is an author and academic with a journalism background, currently completing a PhD in media studies at the University of New South Wales in Sydney, Australia. It's a very international event tonight. I'm very happy about this. Her first book, White Tears, Brown Scars, How White Feminism Betrays Women of Color, traces the role that white womanhood and feminism have played in the development of Western power structures. The book was inspired by her viral 2018 essay, How White Women Use Strategic Tears to Silence Women of Color, which was published in The Guardian and became a global flashpoint for discussions of race and gender. So again, another huge warm welcome to both of these. And Rafia, take it away.
Thank you so much. Hey, Ruby.
Hi,
thank you to The Word and Duende District for doing this for us. I'm very, very excited to speak to you. I've read your book, admired your work for so long, and this is fantastic. It's great to be able to talk to someone who's been an inspiration to me.
Oh, no, thank you so much. Your book's brilliant. I love how you also took a global focus. But what I love about how both our books work together is your your international focus, differs from mine, because obviously there's only so much you can do. So it's like it helps to give a really, really rounded view of this issue. So congratulations, and thank you for having me today.
Thank you so much. So I guess should I go ahead and read?
Yeah, we're going to start with a short reading from Rafia. Take it away.
Okay, so I'm going to read the author's note, which is the first three or so paragraphs of the book. Very short, but I think it's a good place to start because it clears up a lot of misconceptions about what I mean by white feminism, and also how I specifically define it. So here we go. A white feminist is someone who refuses to consider the role that whiteness and the racial privilege attached to it have played and continue to play in universalizing white feminist concerns, agendas, and beliefs as being those of all feminism and all of feminists. You do not have to be white to be a white feminist. It is also perfectly possible to be white and feminist and not be a white feminist. The term describes a set of assumptions and behaviors which have been baked into mainstream Western feminism, rather than describing the racial identity of its subjects. At the same time, it is true that most white feminists are indeed white, and that whiteness itself is at the core of white feminism. A white feminist may be a woman who earnestly salutes the precepts of intersectionality, the need for feminism to reflect structural inequalities drawn along lines of race, faith, class, etc., as well as gender, but fails to cede space to the feminists of color who have been ignored, erased, or excluded from the feminist movement. White feminists can attend civil rights marches, have Black, Asian, and Brown friends, and in some cases be Black, Asian, and Brown themselves, and yet be devoted to organizational structures or systems of knowledge that ensure that Black, Asian, and Brown women's experiences, and so their needs and priorities, remain sidelined. More broadly, to be a white feminist, you simply have to be a person who accepts the benefits conferred by white supremacy at the expense of people of color, while claiming to support gender equality and solidarity with all women. This book is a critique of whiteness within feminism. It is directed at pointing out what must be excised, what must be broken down in order for something new, something better to take its place. It explains why interventions that simply add Black, Asian, or Brown women to existing structures have not worked. Because it is a critique, it's not possible to present the diversity of views that exist among Black, Asian, and Brown feminists themselves. Others are doing this work, but for that effort to be given its due, this project of dismantling has to be done. This book tackles what whiteness has done within the feminist movement. Similar work can and needs to be done about how whiteness operates within lesbian, gay, trans, and queer movements. The goal here is not to expel white women from feminism, but to excise whiteness with all its assumptions of privilege and superiority so as to foster the freedom and empowerment of all women.
Thank you, Rafia. Okay, so I want to get started on some of the terms that you set out quite early. with my background, I like to focus on rhetoric and discourse. So before we get into the nitty gritty, so in your opening chapter, you talk, I'm just going to quote you a little bit. There is a racial hierarchy here that is left unacknowledged and hence intact. Some women are there to show us why we all need feminism, and others are here to make it happen, to get it to work. So, and then some of the terms you use to illustrate how this racial hierarchy works. So the ones that struck me is the myth of relatability and the white feminist sort of focus or obsession even on rebellion over resilience. Can you explain those to us a little bit, and why they are so instrumental in how white feminism maintains that hierarchy?
Yes, of course. This book came out, the intellectual puzzle that confronted me when I was writing this book was very much the question of, okay, so there is all this excellent work being done by Black feminists, by brown feminists, etc. Why is it still on the margins? Why are books written by brown and Black people something special that you can buy as a commitment to racial equality or whatever? Like, why aren't they part essentially of the mainstream conversation that's happening? And so some of those terms are related to phenomena that I saw happening, but I felt weren't captured by the current vocabulary. So by the cult of relatability, I try to show how the very socially permissible norm that you find people like yourself relatable and people who are not like you unrelatable is essentially something that allows for racism to perpetuate itself. Because if you don't alter a norm and point it out as something that is allowing the status quo of whiteness everywhere, and whiteness knows everything, and all the experts are white and all the trauma-stricken people are Black and brown. Like, if you don't call it out and give it a name, you're essentially never going to excise it from the movement. So it doesn't matter how many books I write or you write or all the very many very esteemed other women who are Black and brown and Asian, BIPOC. It doesn't matter, because you've got this sort of big behemoth in the room about that deals with like relatability. What was the second term?
Rebellion, not resistance.
Rebellion, and that also is part of pointing out, an epistemic system that values certain qualities which are found in white women, right? So, or white Western culture. So by talking about how, for instance, current iterations of feminism focus on rebellion over resilience, I'm trying to point out that if you have an epistemic foundation that is sort of uncritically just there, like these adjectives are just there, and that's what we consider risk takers and rebels to be feminists, but we don't consider resilient women or protective women or women who are cautious because they're trying to ensure that they survive. If you don't unpack that the eye only sees what it's trained to see. So the white culture, the eye has been trained to see rebellion, not resilience. So it means that, you know, when it looks, for instance, at a culture, like say my background in South Asia, in Pakistan, you know, I sit on the shoulders of so many extremely strong and resilient women, my mother first among them. But there's nothing to see here if you just have the rebel lens, right? And so you have this, as a consequence of that, this massive erasure where the lives and you know, the sacrifices, the lives, the contributions, the writings of women who don't fit into the white Western definitions of what is feminist essentially are erased from the movement. You know, and so those are, yeah, so that was both of those, you know, terms were connected to that effort to kind of, in an accessible way, try to get people to look at what they value and why they value it.
Yeah, so like we're looking at deep-seated sort of cultural, not even just norms, but values, what the white, you know, the history of the white Western culture values, which by definition is going to seep into any political movement that arises out of it. And, you know, I know you've gotten some pushback on, because you do discuss some key figures in Western feminism, white women who, regardless of their, you know, the good work they did and the theory that they developed, did also have this, you know, there was the things that they missed, or there was a whiteness in their feminism. And one of these figures is Simone de Beauvoir, which I can see how that's going to get some hackles, you know, up. So, you know, do you want to just sort of discuss her sort of briefly? So what is it that is missing in her work, or is present in her work, that is the presence of white feminism, and why criticisms of your critique have missed the mark in your eyes?
Yes, you know, the sort of critique of Simone de Beauvoir, I mean, it was something, I mean, I suspected that these were her views, but I had never looked beyond just reading The Second Sex as just, you know, a text. But The Second Sex and its sort of enormous contribution to feminism is that it brings the category of woman into philosophical discourse as a universalizable and generalizable entity, right? So before that, it had all been white men. So male, 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 all sort of philosophic discussions were addressed to and about men. And when they meant men, it was white men. And so here comes Simone de Beauvoir, and she wants to say that woman also needs to be, you know, it needs to be a subject in philosophy, and you know, gender. But what she does is, you know, she essentially creates the category of woman as an other, similar to Blacks and Jews. And she discusses the oppression faced by all of these categories, like, so women, Blacks, Jews. But as you can see in the book, I do like a very precise and careful dissection of the fact that the way she uses woman, she always means white women. And when she uses Black, she always uses it to mean Black men. And the problem with that, of course, is that, Black women, brown women are just not part of the discussion for the Beauvoir. And, and because they're not part of the discussion, the oppression that they face is sort of, it's in her kind of view, philosophically irrelevant. And then, obviously what really got me are the very racist things that she actually does say in footnotes. For instance, I think, let me see if I have it right here.
So while Rafia is looking for that, start thinking about your questions. Oh, here we go.
Here,
start thinking about your questions.
She says, so even she purports, let's see. So essentially, she talks about, I'm having trouble finding the exact quote. The history of women in the East, in India and China, has been the effect of a long and unchanging slavery. She says this despite the fact that just a few years before she wrote it, Indian women had managed to overthrow the British Empire and win the franchise. But, later on she goes and the racism becomes even more insidious, right? Because she says, the more a male becomes individualized and lays claim to individuality, the more certainly he will recognize also in his companion a free and individual being. The Oriental, careless of his own fate, is content with the female who is for him an object of pleasure. But the dream of the Occidental, once he rises to the consciousness of his own uniqueness, is to be taken cognizant by another human being at once strange and docile. So essentially what she's saying is white men are the most evolved men of all. And because they're the most evolved men, they should want the women, white women, to be equal to them because white women are the most evolved women. And, like finding this out when I was researching the book was, it was a difficult moment, right? Because my training as a brown person, sadly, as a brown feminist, is that, this is what everybody thought of people like me. And so I have to kind of put up with it and fit myself into the box and kind of like swallow the bitter pill that they would have hated me and thought of me as like, eternally bound in slavery if they knew me. But that is what the book is trying to get people to understand is that you shouldn't have to put up with that. If Simone de Beauvoir is racist and so much of feminist philosophy is erected on her shoulders and on the work that she did on gender, then the fact that she was racist also imbues what she wrote. And if your foundations are, in this sense, built on racist ideas, then how can the structure possibly provide justice to all women, regardless of race?
And so what that says to me is we need to go below or beyond looking at even feminism, Western feminism, white feminism, and Western, the development of Western, philosophy and everything, because when you were reading that out to me, her quote, like that is a you know, it's like it's an iteration, it's a reiteration of the scientific or like the race science philosophy that dominated in North America and throughout the West in the 19th century. This idea that the white man was like sort of the highest evolved being, and then the white woman kind of under him and complementing him, and then sort of everyone else to various degrees. And even this, you know, that quote where she said that the life of the Oriental woman has been one of you know, slavery, is, you know, that is what white women in Australia, like on this continent and in North America as well, like that is the rationale they used for engaging in the removal of children from Indigenous mothers. The women,
Right.
you know, they're slaves to the man, and we can, you know, give these children, we can, you know, well, you know, basically civilize them.
Absolutely. I mean,
and so it's this constant iteration of the same principle, just slightly dressed up for the times. And you know, that's why I personally spent so much time looking at that development of that history, because it's just, as you've sort of just shown, it's just become so imbued in Western culture and Western philosophy and literature that even someone who is in so many ways as, you know, groundbreaking or revolutionary or however you want to call it, as Simone de Beauvoir, is going to absorb and then perpetuate the same, you know, the same ideals, the same ideas. So
yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, the example that you just gave of white women, you know, getting these children from Native women, and it's repeated all over the world. It's what I call in the book the cult of white motherhood, right? Where it's not enough to show that white women are the most feminist and the most, you know, pioneering, and they've discovered everything first, and etc. You know, it extends to motherhood, where you know, brown and black motherhood is constantly devalued. I mean, it doesn't even have to be, I mean, abroad. I mean, like, I've been terrified this whole time that Angelina Jolie is going to go adopt a kid from Afghanistan, once again, to illustrate this paradigm of, you know, the white woman as the always best mother. But you know, it's so, and it repeats itself here too, like within the US, right? Because black mothers, oh, they're teen mothers, they don't have a partner, they are, you know, hanging by a thread, they don't, I mean, any number of negative illusions are tied up with black motherhood. So you know, so I wanted to show that that this is not incidental, and it's repetitive, in the sense that, I mean, gosh, now we're talking about Simone de Beauvoir, and we're talking about like the white-centered, you know, philosophy, feminist philosophy. But I mean, it's happening here right now in the United States as we speak. White women in, you know, prominent media are talking to each other about Afghan women. Never to actual Afghan women themselves, okay? Or very rarely to Afghan women themselves. And even, I don't think I've ever seen a Muslim feminist being interviewed on, in, you know, in the mainstream media, to provide some insight into what could have been. You know, it's always this idea that the intrepid white blonde reporter is going to bring you this story, while all the Afghan women, they're so, you know, illiterate and unfeminist that they're all just going to be trampled by the Taliban. That idea is so, you know, so I mean, like, on the face of it, it's this, oh, well, we're leaving Afghanistan in chaos, etc., etc. What will happen to the women? What will happen to the children? But really, the war of narrative is being won hands down by the United States, because this, I mean, because there's this reiteration of this idea that the US was there to do, and the West at large was there to do good things, and they did good things, and now they have to go, you know, and they can't be there forever. So now all the good things will end. So, you know, you've reiterated the colonial paradigm anew in 2021.
You know, absolutely. And it even, you know, it's just, it goes back to that quote of yours that I read out at the start about, so the Afghan women are there to show us why we need feminism, and then the white women, the white reporters, and even I know you mentioned Angelina Jolie, I know she's been posting about it. So they're there to kind of try to make it happen. And yet they're not there to talk about, you know, the ways in which Afghan women and women in that region and around the world have suffered under Western policies, under Western bombings, under Western occupations, under Western sanctions. All of that doesn't really get a look in. And it's interesting because, you know, going back to what you're saying about Simone de Beauvoir, it's this you know, I don't even want to call it a blind spot. It's too deliberate for it to be even, you know, to be something they just don't see for whatever reason. It's always directed at how are the men of brown and black women oppressing them, so that we can help. So the resistance of women of color, I mean, against colonial oppression, the same way it didn't get a look in with Simone de Beauvoir with South Asian women, it's not getting a look in with Afghan women. And it's always, oh, look what the Taliban is doing, not look at what we've had a hand in doing and in creating well before the 2001 invasion. So it kind of seems, you know, to me that really this is such a key aspect that of what we as in women of color and you know white women who see this same problem, is to really look at this role of imperialism and how white Western feminists have for so long not just ignored it but actively endorsed it and supported it, and how that you know, before we can, you know, talk about this idea of a sisterhood or a, you know, an inclusive or whatever word you want to use for feminism, that has to be on the table. Like that has to be really faced, because we're obviously, like you said, we're seeing it happening all over again in Afghanistan. And so like when you can remember the initial reports from the 2001, you know, war, just to see the exact same narrative coming up again. And it's like, how is this even possible? Like, and it's because that just hasn't been looked at.
Yeah, I think that the issue is, okay, so one of the feelings that motivated me in writing this book was that I felt that feminism was essentially on life support, you know, maybe not for white women who continue to sort of be the girl boss, you know, dominating everyone and telling everyone what to do, but for everywhere else in the world. And so it was like this kind of dark point where I felt like, and which exists today, that I don't know if we will ever be able to disaggregate feminism from imperialism and white supremacy. But I felt that we absolutely as feminists had to try. And that's what this book is about, which is why, you know, I read the author's note about white women. I mean, I don't believe that all white women who are feminists are white feminists, but I do think that white women who are feminists need to fight white feminism, because I think that we're at a key point, I feel, in terms of the transformation of race relations, in terms of demographic transformation of the United States. And it's either now or never. So I guess I feel like we can either have this very uncomfortable conversation about race within feminism, or we can just kind of, you know, let white women lord over an ever shrinking pool of people, because I mean, it's just becoming irrelevant. Like, people can see when, you know, I mean, Afghans, the whole treatment of the Afghan is so condescending and paternalistic right now, of Afghan men even, and women. But it's almost like you know, there's no realization that people aren't stupid. You know, they know that you're bombing them on Monday and saying you'll build a school on Saturday, but their people died on Monday. So who are they going to send to this school? You know, and so this kind of deliberate kind of you know, thing that white feminists very particularly did in 2001 in climbing on to the war on terror, you know, bandwagon. It was very much an iteration of what used to be, oh, save me from black men, you know. So now it was, save me from brown terrorists, and gave a carte blanche to their government to go out and bomb them to the Stone Age, which is what the US has done, and which everyone in America seems to conveniently have forgotten. So, you know, I wanted to bring the historical examples and hold them very close to our contemporary situation. So if at the very least, people could understand the frustration that, you know, I have experience. I'm not Afghan, I'm Pakistani, but, you know, I have experience of what it feels like to be from a very tiny, small country and have this superpower breathing down your neck, threatening to bomb you, because there's really nothing that can stop them. And in Afghanistan, nothing stopped them. And so you have a devastated society. And now, like, you know, it's becoming, once again, it's like, if you look at the news stories, oh, this woman from Oklahoma, she saved all these whole 12 girls, Afghan girls. And it's not even true. They haven't even done that. The Qataris are the ones running, you know, the planes that are getting, you know, people out. But it's again a show of white benevolence. You know, it's a show of white moral superiority. And that is so tied in with white feminism.
Absolutely. So, you know, I was doing an interview, a radio interview about, you know, the situation in Afghanistan and how it relates to the region more broadly. Like, I'm from Lebanon, Syria. So, and how I describe the role of the West, and the US in particular, as being, you know, the most powerful Western state, is it's like helping to burn somebody's house, right? But then at the last minute, you run in and you save like a couple of the people out of, say, whatever, 10 people that live there. They've got no time to take anything else. You just grab those 2 people and then you expect gratitude. Well, I saved your life. And it's like, wait, but my family's dead and I have nowhere to live. Like, and that is how I see like the role of the West. Now, I'm not saying they did it all on their own, you know, obviously. This is not just about people in West Asia and South Asia and Central Asia just kind of sitting there and letting all this stuff happen from the West. But they had such a huge hand in it and continue to have such a huge hand in the religious extremism, the violence, the oppression.
I mean, yeah, the whole source of this. I mean, the issue is that there is no calculation right now of these moral victories that the West arranges for itself by controlling the narrative. And that's the same dynamic, within white feminism, whether it's abroad or it's at home. I mean, if you talk about white feminists like Hillary Clinton and Madeleine Albright, who all, and Samantha Power, that were all about bombing Afghanistan, then, you can look at feminists like Catherine McKinnon and Andrea Dworkin from the, 80s and 90s, who, essentially said to the state that you have to, pass this Violence Against Women Act. And Latina and Black women told them that this act, which requires the police to arrest someone if they're called out on a domestic violence, complaint, is going to contribute so much to mass incarceration. And of course, nobody listened to them. And the act was passed and is passed. And, within a few years, you could see the results. Black men were being arrested 5 times more than white men. And the amount of violence that women in Black and brown communities had actually increased, by like 10, 20%, despite the passage of this act. So, it's again like the white feminist sort of allying with the state to imprison Black men at home and bomb brown men abroad. And because
Absolutely.
right, you need a moral cover. It's that, Spivak saying, it's like you're saving brown women from brown men. Like nobody in America seems to have an idea that, Afghan women could have been empowered to have power within their society. Instead, hundreds of millions of dollars were thrown at them. The example that I give in my book is the $400 million USAID program that was supposed to provide job training to 75,000 Afghan women. And that ended up benefiting just 3 of them. And USAID can't account for where that money went. And
it's like, it's just, it's performativity in a way, in a grand scale. It's like they can say, well, we've done it, look how great we are. But I want to say, like, on your point where you're talking about the role that white feminists played in the 90s in, passing these laws that led to more incarceration of Black and brown men, is that we've just had similar debate, if you want to call it that, here, where white feminists have played a role in very strongly endorsed the criminalization of coercive control, in intimate partner violence and abuse. And they've been resisted by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women who are saying this is going to lead to, greater incarceration of Aboriginal men, but also Aboriginal women who are and once again, just the greater vulnerability or susceptibility to intimate partner violence, and indeed all forms of violence that Aboriginal women are exposed to, is used to rationalize or even used to sort of as evidence as to why coercive control laws are needed. But then the women themselves, the Aboriginal women themselves, who are saying, no, we don't want this, are not actually listened to, or else they're listened to quite, oh, okay, thank you, we'll take that on board, but it's not taken on board. So it's playing out yet again and again, and it's again because we're not, and as what your book does so well is we're not confronting this this white savior industrial complex, as you call it, this role of the white savior. We're not confronting it. We're not, obviously it's just so imperative, and yet it's constantly sort of just brushed aside. So I guess, how do we do it? Because as you said, and I'm going to go to questions like in 1 minute. So please start putting your questions in the chat. And you know, as you said, women of color are turning away from it. And, you know, and I had moments, especially in the writing of that book, where I was like, can I even call myself a feminist? Because, you know, if you're looking at, yes, feminism is, you know, that basic definition of women's liberation, etc., and equality, if you want to use that term. But feminism in the West is just so deeply imbued with whiteness, with white supremacy, with white saviorism. I just don't even know how you know, I want to be aligned with that, if that makes sense, without giving up on feminism.
Well, I do see hope, though, in more populist movements like the Black Lives Matter, the, you know, particular movement by Kimberly Crenshaw. That's to say her name. That's after Breonna Taylor, who was murdered by the police while she was sleeping in her bed. You know, I do see hope there, because I see a much wider public engaging with those ideas. And I think what it is forcing into the narrative is politics. Now, you know, white women, when like their idea of, empowerment essentially like takes politics out of all of it and makes being a feminist a brand rather than, you know, a movement. But I do take hope in those movements. But I think that it's going to be like that, from change from below. It's a question, though, of whether those women will want to, you know, ally with white feminists. And that has been a problem, you know, in recent, even, you know, at the Women's March, that was a problem because of this kind of, you know, this inability. I mean, the division of labor for so long has been white women making the decisions and being the compassionate queens at the top, and then all the rest of us, you know, telling our sad stories of trauma, and then like we get like some sort of a few little coins are tossed at us from, you know, the feminist queens. And you know, and so like in a lot of ways, everyone's tired of that except white women, but everyone else is tired of that. And I think that if you know, because we are at a transformational moment in race relations, feminism has a chance, a very small chance, in which it can say, feminists can say, enough of them can say that I'm going to look at my own complicity in these structures. And I can't change everyone, but I'm going to try to not be a girl boss and not lean in and, you know, elbow everybody out and, you know, get ahead at any cost while I trample on other people. I'm going to let go of that and really try to see what sisterhood can yield when I'm not constantly trying to figure out which woman can help me get up another rung on the ladder.
Well, I'm gonna go to questions in a sec. I want to say that in many ways, and it does pay me to say this, I'm looking to North America and more, and Europe as well, to lead that, because I don't really have much faith left that Australian feminism is is willing to take that step, and it's hard to say that, but in many ways, you know, it's been like 2 years since my book has come out here, and in some ways I see white feminism has been even stronger now than it was when I wrote it. But let's go to questions. So Isha's got a question on, what would you say is the interconnection between white fragility and neoliberal feminism? Ooh. Big question.
You know,
thank you.
Okay, we can both take it. I can, like, my answer to that would simply be is that neoliberalism is the policy, the technocratic architecture of control that that essentially centers consumption and makes Homo economicus, where we're all like just economic creatures. So that's the ideology, and that's the means of control. And white fragility is the means of cover up, where, if anybody asks you to be accountable for all of the stuff that you've done through neoliberal, this imposition of neoliberal ideas, then you immediately, do what Ruby so awesomely talks about, is just start crying. You're like, you can't handle it. I was only here to help, and I was only trying to help. And I just wanted all the women to have these chickens so that they'd be entrepreneurs. So that's how they go together. It's a system.
Absolutely. Very good. Looking at the next. Okay, so Tara is asking, any thoughts or advice on discussing the harms of white feminism with our elders? Is this as in, I'm not sure if Tara's speaking as a white person or talking about discussing the harms of white feminism with our non-white elders, because it would obviously be different. So I'm not sure if she wants to sort of clarify that, but I'll read Pavlos's question. This year marks 40 years since The Bridge Called My Back, which was one of the first, at least in the US, prominent publication of voices of women of color and challenging white feminism. What do you think have been some of the gains of feminists of color in the last 40 years? And what are some where not much has changed? So I'll say briefly, I think the fact that there's books like Rafia's and mine itself is a huge change, and where we're not just sort of saying, please, stop overlooking us and please notice us. We're really trying to sort of, critically appraising the history of whiteness and white feminism, and sort of demanding that change and saying, look, we're going to move on without you, as into white women. Unfortunately, from my perspective, in terms where things have not changed, is once again taking it back to the white feminists, a white woman's relationship to imperialism and her comfort with imposing and perpetuating that. What do you think, Rafia?
Well, I think that I can't speak to everybody or every hyphenated feminism, but I think that one of the sources of hope is that I feel that a sense of sisterhood is still alive within Black feminists, within Muslim feminists, more so than perhaps exists among white feminists. And I think that the challenge, of course, is that, white feminism is hegemonic. So, it's the definition of success. So, like, if you're an ambitious brown woman or Black woman in America, all the models of like success beyond, your community, mainstream success, are white. So you have to model yourself after these individualistic sorts of ideas of success and getting ahead, which are antithetical in many ways to your traditions. And I think that has been something that I feel damages. It has really damaged sort of the brown woman or the Black woman or Asian BIPOC psyche, in terms of like, how do I, everything in mainstream culture has told them that they need to climb the ladder, they need to elbow everyone out. And that creates its own sort of oppression and its own sort of silencing, right? Because if you really want to get ahead and get to the top of the ladder and be in the corner office in the C-suite, then you're going to keep your mouth shut about all the issue, all the microaggressions, all the, you know, ways in which you're diminished in the company and your identity isn't really acknowledged or respected. You're just going to keep quiet about it. And that's sort of, you know, that's how that's another way of silencing the strongest voices, is by dangling this abstract carrot. In the end, of course, like, you know, they're going to get pushed out anyway, because why?
Yeah.
I mean, you know, you look
exactly.
at the statistics, right? I mean, like, there's like maybe 2% women of color on boards of Fortune 500.
What I wish, when I see women of color doing that here, very much angling and seeing other women of color as their competition, quote unquote. It's like, oh, there's only so far you can get. How do you not see this? Like, we're going to have to wrap it up soon. So I want to get back to sort of Tara. So my apologies. So Tara was asking, as an Indigenous person, and saying that her mum has many white feminist friends. So how would we sort of what advice would, or thoughts on how she can speak to the harms of white feminism with, I mean, the first thing that popped into my head is I would ask her how it's possibly affected her or those relationships, because I would also say that she probably has a lot to teach you on that as well. You know, it's hard for me personally, I don't know how Rafia feels, to give this sort of one-on-one advice, because these sorts of things very much, you know, when you're talking about speaking to a specific person, she's going to bring all her experiences and her relationships into it, and her knowledge as well.
I think,
so, yeah.
I think, though, I mean, and I'll just give the example of conversations like this with my own mom. And I think what's most important is to look at the lives of your elders and see the qualities that they have embodied, and understand that those aspects of female strength are also feminist. So, you know, sometimes compromise is feminist if you are doing it for the larger good and for justice as a whole. Sometimes, you know, resilience is far more important than rebellion, because you're trying to uphold and keep together, you know, a familial structure that does nurture and sustain you. So I think that one of the huge things that I've heard from, like, women in my family that I've heard, you know, who are also exposed to white feminists and white feminism, is just that, well, what have I done? You know, I've not done anything. But of course they have done so much. You know, they've like educated their children. They've, you know, survived like the deaths of family members. They've, you know, been there to provide the emotional glue. They've done a lot of things. But, you know, it's up to us to sort of recognize that, and then, you know, sort of uplift those characteristics and count them as feminist, you know.
It's like undercutting that Western value system of sort of individual.
Right.
You know, I've done everything on my own, and that sort of, as you said, I like how you brought it back full circle, that idea that you don't have to be this outwardly noticed rebel to have these feminist and valued qualities. So the Word did want to sneak the last question in, so I'll let that before we go. Any advice, thoughts for women of colour supporting one another and resist being played against each other under white supremacy? Look, I'm a big believer in being honest in these situations, because if we're not willing to be vulnerable and honest, then really nothing is going to change. And why I'm sort of saying that is because that's advice that I think I can still use myself, because it's still happening to me. I still see this, as going back to what I was saying earlier, and I see a woman of color that this is in Australia, that pander, if I want to, maybe lack of a better word, to white feminism, and that will turn against other women of color in defense of white women in the movement. And they're doing that strategically for their own advancement.
Right. I mean, they're very good at finding Black or brown or other feminists of color to mount their crap.
Absolutely.
So to speak. But I think in terms of advice, I really, really envision this book as both a conversation starter and even a punching bag for women of color to have these discussions, not just with white feminists, but also amongst themselves. Because I'm not purporting in the book to have the magic solution or know exactly how it can all be fixed. But I do think that the book presents enough material that can be discussed as an idea in a way that doesn't implicate. So I know that these, power differences exist even among, feminists of color. But I feel that the book tries to be that punching bag that you can look at it and you can both look at it and you could both point out, this is all that's wrong with it or could have been done better. And I know that there is a lot that could have, been improved, but it sort of gives you that kind of a tool almost to begin these conversations, because it is an urgent moment and the conversations do have to happen now. And I think that when it's also like, when you do that, you realize that you're being gaslit, right? Yeah. This book is an anti-gaslighting book, where just like your book, Ruby, where like the primary thing you want women of color especially to understand and realize is that they're not alone, that this is happening in every office, you know.
That's been the most rewarding thing for me, has been the amount, the number of women of color from around the world that have written to me to tell me that they felt exactly that their experiences, in many times for the first time, have been written down, and they found that this isn't just about me, and that has done wonders for, how they feel about themselves and how they cope with the world with racism.
This happened last time we had an event, and I can't hear at the end. But what I do want to say, hopefully, can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I just want to extend a huge thank you to Ruby and Rafia. The only other thing I wanted to add, because this is really important to me, just to add on to the conversation, is that one of the ways that women, people of color, are played off against each other, especially women of color, is that we're told under Western white supremacy that there's only enough space for some of us. There is enough space for all of us. And that's what Duende is about. We're creating that space. If you don't think that there's space there, we work together to make that space. Absolutely. And so, this is why these kinds of conversations and, partnerships with the word and these amazing books, which please buy them. They're really brilliant. And these amazing conversations are so important. And I just want to thank everybody. I know we have, everybody from all over the world, and this is a beautiful space. These are the spaces that we create with each other. And thank you all. Thank you, Rafi. Thank you, Ruby. Thank you, Viniaka. Love you.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight and creating this space. Thank you so much, Ruby. Thank you, Rafia. What an incredible and timely and just perpetual discussion, really. Yeah. And, but I know that I walked away with so much, and I hope that everyone in the audience did too. And I know that there's just glowing thank yous there. So thank you all. And please, everybody, support these wonderful authors by buying their books. through Duende District Books. And I hope that you will join us for another conversation in the near future. Have a wonderful evening, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.